Caleb brought up the point that Tennessee and their defensive linemen are beginning to grow a bit of a tradition. Are the Vols on the verge of being defensive linemen U? Caleb, make the case, because when you first said it, I felt like a 2x4 upside the head. I didn't see it coming. As you made the argument, it makes a lot of sense. Is Tennessee close to being defensive line U? They could have the number 1 pick in the NFL draft come out next year. That would be a heck of a feather in the cap.
It was always a mistake to label Tennessee wide receiver U over defensive line U. Their defensive line has had greater NFL success. They have been defensive line U since the days of General Neyland. This is the school that produces transcendent defensive linemen. And we start with, as you know, Dave, a very famous man from the 1950s by the name of Doug Atkins, who is in the Hall of Fame and was the most, we talk about James Pearce. Yes, it's pre-integration, but pre-integration, Doug Atkins was the most freakishly gifted athlete of all time, right?
For those that don't know, if I won the lottery, Doug Atkins is the book I would write. So, yes, he was a generational athlete. I believe even had it been integration, which we don't know, he would have still been one of the best athletes walking the face of the field. We're talking about a guy who jumped over offensive linemen. I mean, think of Victor Wembanyama, who a lot of people think is a generational type of player. Think of that type of ability compared to everybody else, that you're bigger than the offensive lineman and you jump over him. That's all you need to know about Doug Atkins. And you haven't even gotten to a guy named Reggie yet.
Oh, and I'm still far away from that, because I'm just going the early days real quick. Because in addition to Doug Atkins being a NFL Hall of Famer from that time period, there was a guy before him by the name of Ed Cyphers, who played for General Neyland in the 1940s. He was an NFL Pro Bowler. Another defensive end by the name of Darius McCord. He was an NFL Pro Bowler. And then into the 80s, we're going to get to Reggie White. There was a guy by the name of Mike Kofer, another NFL Pro Bowler. Then you're right. You have this guy by the name of Reggie White, who, following Doug Atkins, became the best defensive lineman himself in NFL history. And that is before the former era where, it gets freakish, because we talk about Leonard Little in the 90s, who obviously is one of the greatest defensive linemen of all time for college, one of the greatest freakish athletes. Then, Dave, interior defensive line, Tennessee had the greatest defensive tackle tandem in college football history with John Henderson and Albert Haynesworth. Is that fair to say? That's the greatest tackle tandem in college history.
Yes. And if you want to go to defensive linemen, I thought at first you were going to just say defensive ends, but don't forget Sean Ellis. Don't forget guys too that our generation would know. And
I was getting there, yeah.
Yeah, you and me aren't going to know the 40s or the 50s, the contributors. But how many contributors has Tennessee had just during our generation, where people have gone out there and played? Maybe not superstars, but they've gone out there and played. I've got some numbers to throw at you, but finish your point.
Yeah, so think about it. From 97 roughly to 2001, Tennessee produced John Henderson, Albert Haynesworth, Sean Ellis, and Leonard Little. If an NFL team had that defensive line, it'd be the best defensive line in NFL history, wouldn't it? All in their pride.
Yeah.
And then Tennessee, you're right, contributors down the road. One of my favorite players, rest in peace, Paris Harrelson. Paris Harrelson was a heck of a player in the NFL. Then you have Malik Jackson. Malik Jackson literally delivered Peyton Manning his second Super Bowl with the way he played. Darwin Walker, Rashad Moore, Turk McBride, Dan Williams. Guys, Tennessee has been Chris Mims. You remember Chris Mims and Chuck Smith during the Johnny Majors years?
Yes.
Yeah. Longtime NFL players. Marion Hobby. Okay, guys, these are all regular contributors in the NFL on top of the Hall of Fame contributors with Leonard Little, Sean Ellis, John Henderson, Albert Haynesworth, Reggie White, Doug Atkins. And now you still have Derek Barnett contributing in the NFL right now. If Billy Ratliff doesn't have injury issues, he's a long-term NFL player, isn't he, Dave?
Yep, totally agree. Now,
loaded talent.
All that being said, I'll let you get out there a little bit. Might be wrong. And I'm going to tell you why. And it's brought to you by Sports Treasures, carrying over 5 million sports treasures and so much more. Follow on Facebook for the best sports memorabilia. Go to Facebook and follow it, Sports Treasures TN, Sports Treasures TN. Wide receiver. According to the Associated Press, the most players that have gone to a particular college and have been drafted in the NFL at wide receiver is led by Miami and Southern California. Now, just missed Florida and Tennessee with 37 apiece drafted. Miami and USC had 40 apiece. Then you get Ohio State 35, San Diego State, 33, LSU 32, Florida State 31, Michigan State 28, Michigan 28, Michigan State 27. Now, defensive linemen. This might be a little bit harder. Okay, they don't split them up, which is good for us. All right. So you have 49 led by the U, Miami. And then just missed is LSU 45, Southern California 44, Nebraska 43, Florida and Florida State 42, Alabama 40, Notre Dame and Oklahoma 39 apiece, Texas 37. I don't know how quickly you could pull up Tennessee players at particular positions that have been drafted, but Tennessee is pretty far down the line in defensive linemen. They're right up there at wide receiver. Doesn't mean they haven't produced some amazing defensive linemen, and probably the top end is better than at the wide receiver position. But as a group, according to numbers, it's the wide receivers. Does that surprise you?
It doesn't. Tennessee is extremely deep in number of receivers drafted, and many of them have good careers. In terms of actual, relative to them being wide receiver U, though, Dave, I'm going to make people in Knoxville's heads explode. Tennessee's been very underwhelming with its NFL production from receivers. And they have 4 Pro Bowlers. I mean, Dave, the best NFL receiver to go to Tennessee is between Stanley Morgan and Cordarrelle Patterson. And neither of them are going to the Hall of Fame.
No, I agree. And the best one should have been Carl Pickens, but he had the attitude issue. A couple of other defensive linemen that are named that we didn't even get to is Darwin Walker.
I mentioned him.
In college. Jesse Mahalona was phenomenal.
If Justin Harrell didn't get hurt.
Yep. I mean, there's a ton of good players that Tennessee has had. So I still think they're wide receiver you, but you make a good argument that you need defensive lineman you as well.
Yes, and where I'm at is, do you judge a school as they're the U of this school by quality or quantity? Because in quantity, it's receivers. But okay, let's talk about these Miamis and these other places. Do they have the quality? Tennessee might have, if you're taking the best defensive lineman of all time, Tennessee might have 2 of them. Tennessee has 2 players in the conversation for greatest defensive lineman of all time in Reggie White and Doug Atkins.
No argument. I'll tell you another one that's really freaky. Talk about Kennedy was Lincoln's secretary and Lincoln was Kennedy's secretary. Did you know that John Hanna and Reggie White, arguably the 2 best linemen, offense and defense respectively, were both born in Chattanooga?
I did not know that. Have I not told you in the past, Chattanooga football talent, low-key super underrated?
You have, but that's pretty bizarre that I would argue the 2 best linemen on offense and defense respectively are both from the same city, like a couple of miles apart. Technically, I think Hannah lived right across the border.
Well, to be fair, still in Alabama. But
I'm sorry. Zach said when I was a kid, I thought we were Bunner U. That's right. They kept turning out one Colquitt after another.
I've actually made that case too. There was a period though where Tennessee had 2 Colquitts in the NFL, plus Matt Darr, plus Chad Cunningham, plus Michael Pilardi. They have 5 punters starting in the NFL with 2 Colquitts. John Hanna
and Tommy Townsend stopped in just to have a cup of coffee and ended up playing in the NFL after transferring to Florida.
He did, and that was because Trevor Daniel won the starting job, a walk-on who became a punter himself. By the way, John Hanna, Doug Dickey letting him go to Alabama to Bear Bryant, that he should have kept him. I know Doug Dickey went to Florida in that moment. It was 69, 68, but no way he should have let him not leave
Smoky
Tennessee.
Mountain Red said we're due for another Colquitt. You're due for a lot of Colquitts. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you that because Dustin has like, I think 1,800 children. And he has a big Mercedes van that drives them all around, like one of those huge monstrous Mercedes vans. So like when I see a Mercedes van all blacked out driving down the road in Chattanooga, I'm like, there's a whole a bevy of Colquitts in there, I would imagine, because that's what he does. So I'm going to put the over under at 2.5 more Colquitt punters in Tennessee history, because I know that he has about 8 kids. And there's no telling what Britain's going to end up doing. But I'm going to go 2.
Can I reroute something?
Yes.
Can I reroute something? And this will cost me with John Henderson and Albert Haynesworth. Could we say Tennessee's edge rusher U, defensive end U?
See, that's what I thought you were going to go in that direction in the first place.
Well, the reason I didn't is because Reggie White played tackle in college, and John Henderson and Albert Haynesworth together. But looking at it, I think you might be right. If you call Reggie White a defensive end, and if you call Doug Atkins a defensive end, because Doug Atkins played on the interior too in college. And I also left out Steve DeLong, didn't I? The Outland Trophy winner. 1960.
Yeah, you left him out. There's no way you're going to get them all. Either way, I think the amazing part is you could make an argument for interior U, you could make an argument for edge rusher U, or you could make an argument for all of the above.